Welcome to Bloor Central, friends. This is the YouTube version of Sunday Word. The Bible teaching in this recording is for December 10th, 2023. This is the end of our focus on the 12 steps. It's not the end, it's the beginning of the end. No, it's the end of the beginning. That's what it was. This is the end of the beginning of our looking at the 12 steps. These steps are traditionally connected with recovery programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous, and we have been using these not specifically for addiction issues, but just for us to grow in our own spiritual life, to grow in our awareness of the reality of God. And we've recognized the value of each one of these steps, which are not exclusive for those dealing with recovery. I do want to open up this session by looking at a passage of scripture that I really believe gives us some insight into how important this 12th step is. First of all, so step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. Some really interesting stuff today, and I'm hoping, again, that this is the end of the beginning. We've looked at the 12 steps, and now we enter into a lifetime of living out these steps, using them, development, and continually moving forward in this spiritual adventure of becoming more aware of how God is working, again, around us, in us, through us. And I want to start by reading a passage from Mark chapter 5. I'm going to begin in verse 1, and I'm reading down to verse 20. Follow along with me in the New International Version. It says this: They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. The man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often broken chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by a legion of demons sitting there dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. As Jesus was getting out of the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. You know, as I begin to explore this step 12 with you, you know, this is again the end of the beginning. We're coming to a conclusion as we've looked at these steps over the past several weeks. I shared on Sunday, I said, I don't know if you've actually realized how God sees things. And I don't know if you've realized how transformational, how big God's plan is for each one of us. You know, I'm amazed as you look into the scripture, the number of times God expresses such a different way in which he views things. I've always found the story in Mark chapter 12 really interesting, where Jesus stands there and he's watching people put money in the offering plate. And in the middle of this, where people are coming up and put lots of money in, there's a woman, a widow, who comes up and she places just two small coins in the plate. As a matter of fact, someone actually gave me, I don't know if you can see this, this is a coin. This is considered to be an example of what that woman put in the offering plate, just like almost nothing by our standards, or literally nothing. And yet Jesus said, hey, out of all the people that gave, she gave the most, because she gave out of her, she had nothing. She gave all she had. You see, God doesn't see the size of the offering. He sees the attitude that it's given with. He sees the attitude of our hearts. And so many times we're impressed by the big gifts, and people get plaques on monuments and stuff like that because they gave money to a hospital or something like that. But here Jesus says, no, this woman, he sees things differently. She gave out of her need, not out of her abundance. And it's such a fascinating reminder that God sees things differently than we do. I was reminded too, over 100 years ago, in 1919, there was a Salvation Army officer driving along a road in southern Saskatchewan. And as he drove along, he saw a farmer out in a field doing some work. So he pulled his car over. Now, my wife and I drove on this very road 100 years later. In 2019, we were on the exact same road that this officer was on. I am telling you, I've never seen a place so desolate as southern Saskatchewan. My wife and I, we drove for an hour. We saw no signs, no houses, no people, no cars, nothing. I mean, it's just so vast. It's beautiful, but just there's no one to be seen. And I was thinking about 100 years before that, this Salvation Army officer driving along, and he sees a guy out in the field. So he pulls over and he goes over and just starts talking to him. Now, it's really interesting that as he shared with him, this Salvation Army officer, the farmer actually made a decision that he wanted to be a Christian. He wanted to be a Christ follower. So he made that commitment. A year later, that farmer sold his farm to his brother, and he left his life on the farm to become a Salvation Army officer. He spent his life serving Jesus as in leading in different churches. That farmer was my grandfather. My grandfather, who we counted at one point about 25 people had become full-time officers as a result of the ministry of my grandfather. That includes my father and my uncle and my aunt. My aunt Evelyn turned into a legend. I can tell you stories that, I heard about my aunt, like literally from Newfoundland to Vancouver. Not only did they become officers, but my dad's cousin, who actually lived with my grandfather for a while, he became an officer. His daughter became an officer. Her name was Gloria. She was a missionary in Pakistan for several years. When I've heard, as I've traveled around the world in different places, people have heard my last name and said, Hammond, are you related to Gloria Hammond? I guess she'd be my second cousin, Gloria. Really, again, such a hero as she was serving God faithfully in Pakistan, which is, a very difficult country, particularly for women. I mean, this goes on and on. All the influence that my grandfather had, simply because he was willing to step out and to serve God. And it's all because that one guy who stopped on the road that day on a road in Saskatchewan just went over and spoke to my grandfather. Can you recognize how that one decision to go and talk to the guy literally changed my lives, changed so many different lives? Over the last century, that one conversation with that farmer by the side of the road has literally gone around the world. And God sees this whole thing. God sees how these little things that happen in our lives, they might look really small to us, but in actual fact, how they're reproduced. I mean, I became an officer because of that conversation in 1919. Literally, since then, the Salvation Army in Canada has had Hammonds as officers for over a century. Again, we see things so much in the here and now, and we think, our lives are so small and insignificant. But think about if we could take these 12 steps and really apply these things. how can God use our lives over the next century, even more than that, even into eternity? I get really excited about it when I think about the fact that, yeah, I know we can look at the here and now and maybe get a little bit discouraged and think that it's really small and insignificant, but God sees your life differently. He doesn't just see the here and now. He sees the next century and into eternity. He sees he knows your heart. And I'm excited as I look at a program like the 12 Steps and recognize there are these opportunities we have to really focus our lives towards understanding our conscious contact with God and developing that. We spoke about that last week in step 11. But now we come to step 12. And if we can move from this, now step 12 again it's the end of the beginning, where we take what we've learned in the 12 steps and we apply this to the rest of our lives. We actually enter into this ongoing lifestyle of a spiritual adventure. And I would really want us to be taking this seriously. Last week, as I said, that was kind of like the apex. That was as high as we go as we focus on our conscious contact with God. And now we take it in step 12. And step 12 is made up of one assumption and two suggestions. And the assumption is that we have experienced a spiritual awakening. I know that I've certainly benefited and I've had awakenings in my life as a result of the 12 steps. I've had dozens of other people tell me the same thing. I'm hoping that you, as you reflect over these 12 steps, maybe you can take a look at them and reflect and recognize how, as we've worked through these things, as we've worked through these steps, we've become more aware of the reality of God. We've seen him at work as a result of us really working these steps. Now, again, these steps are not just add water and stir. They are work. They do require effort. But literally everyone I know who has applied themselves to these steps has had some kind of spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening can be an individual thing. This isn't the same for everyone. Each one of us are going to have different experiences with this, but somehow, and I'd like you to really think about this for a few minutes, as you look through these 12 steps, can you identify those times where suddenly a specific step has somehow just made you more aware of God being at work, and you begin to recognize it? That's all a spiritual awakening is. It's just somehow we become aware. It's a waking up to some area, and it could be in any area of our lives. Perhaps you've just become aware that you're experiencing more joy in your walk with God. Perhaps there was some sort of oppression in your life in the past, maybe some guilt or unresolved conflict in relationships. And somehow through the 12 steps, you have experienced a new sense of freedom. Maybe there's just a new joy in your life or a new confidence that you're not alone. I would really encourage you to acknowledge those because really step 12 is acknowledging that we've had this kind of spiritual awakening, and to recognize now that as we move into step 12, there is an opportunity for us to continue this journey, that this is just the beginning. It's the end of the beginning. And now we enter into this new format for life where our whole life is centered around progressing in this spiritual journey. One of my concerns about traditional church has been that so much of it is just like, we're here and it's like we've arrived and now we just keep going to church every Sunday until we go to heaven. But to have this sense of, no, we're continuing to press on, recognizing as we continually go through these steps, as we apply these principles to all of our affairs, that we can really join in this journey together. One of the most important principles of any spiritual awakening is to share your experience with others. And I said there's one assumption in step 12, that is that we've had a spiritual awakening of some kind. And the two suggestions so that we can make this a continuing journey, the first is that we are going to share our experience with others. Now, I know as Canadians, we get really nervous here because we don't want to offend people. That's kind of part of our culture. And certainly, we don't want to be those people that are banging someone over the head with the gospel and trying to force them to, follow Jesus against their will many times. In actual fact, that's not what this is stating at all. I want to first of all say this process of verbalizing experience is so very important. Many times, if we don't use the experience that we've received, if we don't somehow pass it on or share it, that experience can literally shrivel up and die. We need to somehow transfer the experience we've had into some sort of message, some sort of communication. Now, for me, I've read a lot about this. I at one point I trained as a teacher, and I can remember talking about how people receive knowledge, and if that knowledge isn't applied, if it lays dormant, then in actual fact there's no kind of engagement with the knowledge, so there's no change in behavior. It's not applied. In actual fact, when we can reflect on something, think about it, apply it to everything, particularly when we verbalize it, when we begin to speak about the knowledge that we've received, our brains kind of engage on a different level. And suddenly, I guess some people say, we begin to own an experience. It becomes real to us. Just knowing about it is very superficial in terms of actually changing our lives. But when we've had an experience and we begin to verbalize the experience, there is a deep thing that is happening within the way that our brain works, that this experience actually becomes reality. There's many passages of scripture that talk about the importance of verbalizing our experience. Even in the passage that we read earlier in Mark chapter 5, this man who had experienced a release from the demon possession, he wanted to go with Jesus. And Jesus said, no, I've got something more important for you. Go tell people what the Lord has done for you. He didn't say, go and convince them, go and argue with them, go and force them to come to church on Sunday. That's not what he said. He said, just go share what the Lord has done with you, what the Lord has done for you, and how he's shown mercy to you. This is such a fundamental part of our, ongoing spiritual walk with Jesus, that we just tell people what God is doing in our lives. This is not trying to fix them. This isn't trying to fix all their problems. This isn't trying to tell them they should follow Jesus. This is simply tell them what's happened in your life. Share your experience with the 12 steps. In Romans 10, 9 and 10, it says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart you believe and are justified. It's with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. There's something so deeply spiritual going on when we simply verbalize what God has done in our lives. I think part of our hesitation here is that we're often assuming that this means that we have to go and start beating people over the head with their Bibles, forcing them, to come to Jesus, trying to tell them everything they're doing wrong. Jesus doesn't speak about that with the man that was healed, and the 12 steps don't refer to that. All they're saying is, be open and honest about what has happened in your life as a result of the 12 steps. I have found that, the best way to share these things is in the context of a relationship, is these transformational experiences are best shared when they're shared in the context of a relationship. As we come to a person and we begin to know, as we get to know someone, that we can just share our experience. When we start sharing all of these deep theological truths, I really believe that, and when we start forcing people that they have to listen to us, I believe that we come across as manipulative, as inauthentic. It sounds like it's rehearsed. It sounds like we don't care about people, that we're just talking to them because we have an agenda. And so there's a deep need for us on a level of relationship to share our experience. It's been said, what we're talking about here is nothing complicated. It's simply one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. We're just saying what the Lord has done in our lives through the 12 steps. And in my experience, 12 steps that information is shared much healthier, and people are much more receptive. The best way that I have found for people to be receptive to what I say, the best way that I've found for that to happen is for me to listen to them. In actual fact, I really believe that we are heard if we listen. If we're willing to listen to someone and understand who they are and what's important to them, and what experience they're dealing with, that gives us a context to share what God has done in our lives. And it is so much more, it is received so much more graciously. Jesus said in Matthew 10, in Matthew 7, verse 6 is, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw pearls to pigs. And what he's talking about, that don't take your words and throw them out to people that are not going to receive it, to people that are going to treat them with disrespect. Use our words carefully. I know that sometimes when we're sharing our experience, people are afraid they're going to be asked some, Bible verse that they won't know, or they're going to be asked some sort of, complex theological question that's going to be really, scary for them. Matthew 10:19, Jesus says, when you're in those tough situations, don't worry, the words will be given to you. All we're required to do is to share what God has done for us. That gives people an opportunity to ask us about our deeper experience. It also gives us an opportunity to have that experience kind of authenticated in our lives, if that makes sense. Matthew 10:19 says, but when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time, you'll be given what to say. When we begin to simply share what the Lord has done for us, the Holy Spirit equips us with the appropriate responses. If we're asked questions and we don't understand what to say. The second suggestion that is made, the first one is that we share our experience. The second one is to practice these principles in all areas of our life. So, the 12 steps is now summarized, and to take all these things that we've learned over the last number of weeks and start applying them literally in every area of our life, whether it be business, relationships, finances, sex life, how we spend our money, places we go. Literally, we begin to use the 12 steps now as an ongoing guide in how we make decisions and how we live out our lives. It provides us with a great pattern for life. And this is how we are guaranteed this future spiritual adventure as we continue to work the 12 steps. Again, last week in step 11, we spoke about Joshua 1:8. Keep this book of the law always upon your lips. Meditate on it day and night so you may be careful to do everything. Be careful to do everything that is written in it. Then you'll be prosperous and successful. If we're looking for our lives to really be meaningful, to be prosperous and successful, we need to recognize it's not just about knowing this. It's about actually applying it to our lives. And that's what we're talking about with these 12 steps now. Is that this wasn't a lesson that we did that now we move on to something else. This was a pattern for life that now we make ours, that we put into our everyday life. There's a really interesting book written by Keith Miller called A Hunger for Healing, and he uses the 12 steps. And near the end of it, he suggests that the 12 steps is almost like, it's like a set of golf clubs. Now, I don't play much golf, but I understand that, for different shots in a golf game, you use different clubs. If you want a long shot, you get a driver out, which will give you the distance that you want. If you're closer to the green and you want the ball to kind of loop up, then you use a higher number so that it'll go up and land down on the green and it won't roll so far. If you're in the sand, if you get stuck in the, what do they call it? Oh, the bunker. That's right. When you get caught in the bunker, then you get a wedge that'll help you get out of the sand. If you're on the green, you use a putter. There's all these different clubs that you would use for different shots. And what Keith Miller suggests is, use the 12 steps like a bag of golf clubs, that as you face challenges, as you make decisions, as you move forward in your life, and you're confronted with some kind of, challenge, whatever it might be, that you recognize, hey, this is something where I can really use step one. This is where I really need to be reminded of step one. This is where I need to be reminded that I am powerless. This is a good one where I can think about step two, where I'm reminded that there is a higher power that can restore me to sanity. Again, whatever situation we run into, there might be one of the 12 steps that can help us at that particular time, and becoming more familiar with them so that we have them available to us, just like, a set of golf clubs. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have been able to share with you about the 12 steps. Certainly our discussions on Sunday have been extremely powerful in my life, have given me incredible insight, and have helped me to understand how to work these steps in my life. As I've done that, I've certainly had spiritual awakenings in different situations where I begin to really recognize that God is at work. Last Sunday, as we were concluding, lots of people were thanking me, saying, "Well, that's really appreciate what you had to share." I want to confirm. Honestly, I don't think I've ever come up with a really original idea in my life. Anything I shared over the past few months, I guess, has been based in books that I have read about the 12 steps. Keith Miller's book, A Hunger for Healing, Aaron White's book, Recovery. I think that's the name of Aaron White's book. Also a book by Trevor Hudson, who I've often quoted. I've also read the big book from AA. There's so much great literature out there that I've really used to gather some of this information. But all of the information we learn and all of the stuff we read really it's kind of futile until we're really ready to apply these steps to our lives. I want to encourage you to really treat these 12 lessons that we provided, I guess 13 with the introduction, to treat these as golf clubs, that these are tools that can help us moving forward to be constantly aware, developing our conscious contact with God, recognizing the reality of God as He works around us and in us and through us. Our lives can take on such a deep, significant meaning. Maybe on the outside, it doesn't look like much, but who knows what God can do with your life to produce a harvest 30, 60, or 100 times what you could ever imagine over the next century.